Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm meadsy69. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about where to start. So a few weeks ago I said that I was going to make more videos for the newer players. People have been asking. They don't get many views, but you know, sometimes you've got to scrap the views. It doesn't matter about the views, and you need to try and help these newer players, even if there's 10 or 100. At least hopefully this will help these become better players. So today we're going to talk about where to start. If you're just joining the game, where is the best place to start? Now there is 8 tech tree lines. Not all of them are a good place to start. Now I would only recommend 2 tech tree lines to start, and that is the German tech tree line and a Russian tech tree line. So as you can see, the German tech tree line, there is a few lines that you can go up. There's tank destroyers, there's heavies, there's mediums. Again, not all of them is a good place to start. Now what I would recommend is the kind of the E100 line, but not all the way up to the E100. I would stop around about the E75, and then maybe if you're not ready, if you don't feel you're ready to go to that next level in tier 10, then start another tech tree line. So you've got the European line. Definitely I would not start with this line. The Kranwagen, the 60 TP, you could get away with the line, but yeah, I probably wouldn't start from there. You've got the Peugeot line and you've got the TVP line. Definitely them 3. The Kranwagen line, because it's got that auto reloading system, I wouldn't start from there just right away. The same as the Peugeot, it's a difficult line, and the TVP line is also a very difficult line to start off with. So I wouldn't start off with any of the European nation lines. You've got the French line as well, which is, yeah, again, I start with the French line, but sometimes there is on a tech tree line, sometimes it could be good to start until you get to like tier 5, and then after that it could become very, very difficult. Now the American line is also another good line to start, very good line to start if you are going on the T32 route, the E5 route, but again, I probably wouldn't play it all the way up. I'd maybe stop at the T32. Possibly you could go all the way up. It is a kind of decent line to grind, but more you're looking at the lower tiers. You're not looking at the higher tiers right now. You want to learn the game. And you can do that in tanks like the T1 Heavy, the M7, the M5 Stuart is really, really good. And the M6 is decent, not the best, and then you get to the T29, which in my opinion is one of the best tier 9 tanks. Now the T1 Heavy in tier 5 is pretty much my favorite tier 5. You can see I've enriched it, the only tank I've enriched in the game. So yeah, I mean, that is a decent line as well. All the other American lines I wouldn't go for right away. Don't forget, it all depends on what kind of play style you have, but when you start the game, you're not really going to have a play style. You're not really going to know if you're good at mediums. You're not really going to know if you're good at tank destroyers, heavies, light tanks, and that's why I say sometimes you have to sort of play up to tier 5, then get the feel of it, because tier 5 you have everything. You do have tank destroyers, you have heavies, you have mediums, you have light tanks. Get the feel of it, because if you grind a light tank line and you don't feel right, you don't feel, okay, I'm not really doing too well, don't go up any further than that. Don't go any further than tier 5. If you feel that you're not ready to play a light tank in tier 5, you're definitely not going to be ready when you get up to tier 9s and tier 10s. So just start a new line. Get to tier 5. Yeah, okay, don't really like mediums. Let me go and try heavies. Get to tier 5 and heavies. Okay, this feels pretty decent. Yeah, I'm not playing too bad. Maybe then start another line, a tank destroyer line. But of course, there are still lines. I mean, the German line and the Russian line, I would always start, as a new player, I would always start as a heavy tank, because you're able to make errors and sometimes get away with it. And you can't really make them errors when you are in a light tank or a medium or a tank destroyer with no armor. So in this video, we're going to talk about the Panzer III. We're going to talk about this line, basically the E100 line. because this is a good place to start. I do think this is a really good place to start. The Panzer III is a decent tank. It's got a little bit of armor. I mean, not too much really, but you can still get the troll bounces in tier 3. It's got 828 DPM. Now, looking at DPMs is kind of funny when you look at these lower tier tanks, especially in tier 3, because it looks crap. When you're used to looking at the 3000 DPMs in sort of tier 8, 9, and 10, when you look at a DPM like this and think, oh my God, it's only 800. But you got to remember, it is only tier 3. Tier 1 and tier 2, to be honest, I wouldn't really worry about, because you do that through the sort of the tutorial anyway. It only has an 80 alpha gun, and the aim time 2.2, which is pretty good, and the dispersion is 0.345. So not the best of dispersions, but these lower tier tanks, you don't really need to focus too much on these kind of stats, because you're not going to be camping in the back in a tier 3 game. So I would definitely start. The Panzer III is a good place to start in the German tech tree. It's, I mean, again, it all is your kind of game, is all kind of your play style, and that's why I say you're not forced. Nobody is forced to go up to tier 10. Like, it's not a competition. It's not a competition to see who can get to tier 10 the quickest. Only go to tier 10 when you feel that you're ready. And this doesn't just go to new players. This goes to old players as well, that sometimes have 10, 20,000 battles. They feel that they need to get all the tier 10s. But even after 10,000 battles, you still might not be ready for the tier 10s. You still might not be ready, and especially if you do grind this kind of line, and the T1 heavy line, because they are all different. Some are kind of the same, but the thing with this line is you get the E75 in tier 9, and then you get the E100, which is a massive change. It really is a big change, and I prefer the E75 than I would the E100, especially for learning to angle, learning to side scrape, everything like that. The E75 is not the best for it, but it can do it. But if you want to learn that kind of gameplay, that kind of game style where you are side scraping, hold down, then I would probably now go for either the IS4 line or the IS7 line. Probably IS4, because the IS4 you can go hold down, you can also side scrape, and things like the IS7, you can't really side scrape or anything like that. So again, get to tier 5, go to tier 5, and if you are not liking heavy tanks, if you don't like heavy tanks, if you're one of those guys that just want to whiz around the battlefield, and you feel that you can do that, and you're pretty good with fast tanks, then yeah, by all means, go for it. Go for the medium tanks. But as a new starter in a new line, I wouldn't go for the Leopard 1s or the Batchats or the T100s or anything like that. Honestly, I would go for tank destroyers or heavy tanks like the IS4, IS7, etc, etc. Of course, there are some tank destroyers that you probably won't get away with. Things like the Grill, the Jaegeru, tanks like that, they are very difficult to play. Maybe something like the E3 or even the E4, but with them, you're not really learning tank destroyers. If you're playing the E4, then you're playing it like a heavy tank. The E4 is basically a heavy tank. So if you want to learn heavy tanks, then of course, yeah, you can go the E4 route, but I wouldn't recommend it as such, because the line leading up to the E4 are still quite difficult with the T28 prototype and tanks like that. So I would honestly go for heavy tanks. That's what I would always say as a new starter. I would go for heavy tanks, because you're able to get away with certain things that you wouldn't be able to get away if you are driving the tank destroyers like the Grills or the medium tanks. I would honestly just go with these. And of course, the lower tier tanks are normally light tanks or medium tanks anyway. It's only really when you get to sort of tier 5 and tier 6, tier 4, tier 3, tier 2, tier 1s and tier 2s, again, you don't really need to worry about, because you don't play them long. Tier 1, you only have 1 or 2 battles. Tier 2, you only have sort of 3 or 5 battles, maybe not even that. It's when you start getting to tier 3s, you start having a little bit more. Tier 4s, even more, and then tier 5. and that's where it starts getting to the big guns or the bigger guns, especially when you start getting to tier 6, when you're then playing against things like smashers, annihilators. So I would then, that's why I say stop at tier 5, because at least in tier 5 you're only really going to come up against KV2s, of course Panzer 4s with the DPMs, and again, that's why I say tier 5. If you're not doing good in a certain tank when you get to tier 5, just go to a different tier. No one's going to sit and rage at you because you're not ready. No one's going to sit, if you're not ready to go this line or further than tier 5, play it more. Just because you've got the XP to get tier 6 doesn't mean you should get that tier 6. Only do that when you feel you're ready. If you're playing the T1 heavy and you're starting to do better, you're bouncing shots, you're winning, you're doing damage, okay, I'm going to start going up a tier. Is it going to be a massive change? Yes, it is. The T1 heavy and the M6 are big changes. Not only the tank is very similar, but you're coming up against tier 7s rather than tier 6s. So it is a big change. Even when the tank is very similar, it's still a big change because of the tanks you're going to come up against. So the line itself with this line, the Panzer 3, I would then go down. So I wouldn't go the medium route. When you're up against, when you've got the tier 4, the Panzer 4D, then the Panzer 4G in tier 5, then I would start going sort of, that's when I would go the heavy route with the VK36, because that's a great tier 6 tank. The VK36 is a fantastic tank. And then go that line all the way to the E75, where you can, again, you've got a nice gun, you've got speed's okay for what it is. It's basically a super heavy, and then yeah, if you're not ready to get that tier 10, then start a new line. Doesn't matter where you start a new line. If you get to tier 6 and 7 and then feel, right, I'm losing, I'm not doing great, just start a new line and start again. Maybe it's you, maybe you need to learn more, or maybe it's just because you're not so good at playing that kind of tank, that tank type. So that's when you can just start again with a different tank type. So there is a lot to learn. Obviously, I would wish that more newer players do look at YouTube and start learning. And again, not just newer players, because there are some players in tier 10 that should not be in tier 10. And that's where the experience is ruined for the rest of us, because we are trying, we're playing the game, we enjoy playing the game, we're doing well in the game, but it does get ruined with these newer players in tier 10 that just doesn't have a clue. They don't have a clue. We've all seen it. We've all seen it. These players in tier 10 and they've got 30,000-40,000 battles because and they're still useless because they haven't been bothered to learn. So I hope this little video helps. Of course, I will do some more videos for the newer players, but I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Meadsy, and I will catch you all very soon. Bye-bye. With